Hello and welcome to Inside Iraq. I'm Jassim Azzawi. After 2 years in office, Al-Maliki's government report card is mixed at best. The government claims Iraq is turning a corner with a new sense of optimism and surge in security. Its opponents charge the economy is in shambles, political life is paralyzed, and sectarian policies are taking deep roots thanks to an incompetent and corrupt coterie. Meeting in Sweden this week, the international community will examine Iraq's commitment to root out endemic corruption and political reform. One thing is certain, if the next 2 years of Al-Maliki's tenure are anything similar to the last two, Al-Maliki will find himself isolated and alone without his strongest supporter, President George W. Bush. Nadim Baba reports.
A proud moment for Nouri Al-Maliki. Soon after becoming Iraq's longest-serving premier since the invasion, he reopened a Baghdad bridge destroyed in April 2007.
If we go back in time to the day this bridge was bombed, Iraq was on the brink of the abyss, overwhelmed by the forces of evil, terrorism, ignorance and spitefulness.
It was a chance for Maliki to argue he's turned things around, and he can point to two major initiatives. One is still going on in the northern city of Mosul, with a drive to flush out Sunni fighters linked to Al-Qaeda. The other has seen government troops take on Shia militias, including the Mahdi army, controlled by Muqtada al-Sadr, in Baghdad and also Basra. But some Iraq analysts are skeptical about his motives.
Launching military strikes just adds to the charge that he's using his authority for his own interests. It was the Sadrist bloc that helped Maliki take power. His action against them now comes ahead of local elections and the US-Iraqi agreement that's scheduled to come in by the end of July.
Nouri Al-Maliki's relations with the Sadrist bloc remain problematic. They left him vulnerable when they quit the cabinet in 2007, and their militia has largely ignored his order to hand in their weapons. And now Maliki has suffered another setback. The main Sunni Arab political bloc, the Accordance Front, has suspended talks on rejoining the government because they were refused an extra cabinet post. Maliki's been accused by many Sunni politicians of being deaf to their concerns, of being blatantly partisan. But others say no one could do much to halt the growing sectarianism.
Neither Al-Maliki nor any other player in the political process is in a position to reach reconciliation. The parties, regardless of their sectarian affiliation, adopt agendas completely conflicting with those of their rival parties.
What concerns Iraqis most, of course, is not who their prime minister is, but things like a constant electricity supply and getting their children an education. The headmistress of this Baghdad secondary school is optimistic.
The security situation is very good compared with 4 or 5 years ago. Thank God female students are safe when they arrive at school or go home.
Music to Nouri Al-Maliki's ears, but what kind of future he can offer this generation is still being debated. Nadim Baba for Inside Iraq.
To assess Al-Maliki's tenure so far and what the future holds for him for the next 2 years, I'm delighted to welcome from Dubai Salih Al-Mutlak, leader of the National Dialogue Front, and from Baghdad, Al-Ibadi, a senior political advisor to Prime Minister Al-Maliki, and from Amman, Jordan, Anas Al-Tikriti, an Iraqi analyst. Let me start with you, Al-Ibadi. The last 2 years, if you look at it critically, they don't hold much for what Al-Maliki's government did for Iraq.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, of course, I don't agree much. There has been, of course, ups and downs. There has been a lot of challenges in the last 2 years. But all in all, on average, if you look at the security situation in the country, economical situation in the country, there has been a drastic improvement. Yes, I agree. Still, we have a long way to go. But the improvement compared to the last 2 years is huge. And the government, I think it has accomplished much.
Needless to say, this coming from a senior advisor to Al-Maliki, that is what you expect, Salih Al-Mutlak. But I'm sure you have a different assessment regarding the economy, the electricity and the security situation.
Well, in fact, I don't see any improvement in all the aspects. My brother Haider al-Mullah is saying, if you look at, at the economy, we don't see any real improvement in the economy. If you look at the services, including electricity or water treatment, also you don't see anything, that you consider it as an improvement. If you look at agriculture, for instance, the production of this year is less than 25% of the production before 2003. If you look at the industry, you could hardly find a factory which is producing something for the Iraqis. We are importing almost everything from outside. Yes, there is some sort of improvement in the security, I will admit that, but this improvement came from the awareness of the people. It's not the government itself.
And as a security, that begs the question, the bleak assessment by Salih Al-Mutlak, is it a result of incompetence or is it a result of the people driving this government?
Well, I think that Salih Al-Mutlak put it quite adequately in that any kind of improvements, and I also agree that the security situation in various areas has improved in comparison to how bleak it was a few months ago, but any kind of improvement has been people-led. Unfortunately, once again, we seem to be missing the point. Whilst we may be seeing from a particular perspective that there are improvements. Yes, I mean, when the Americans look at Iraq, there are many improvements. When certain major parties, political parties in Iraq look at the situation in Iraq, yes, there are many improvements. However, no one seems to be speaking on behalf of the ordinary person on the street who still continues to suffer on a day-to-day basis. Facts don't lie, Jassim, and the facts say that we still have more than 3 to 4 million Iraqis strewn across the region living as refugees, as well as more than 1 million Iraqis displaced out of their homes living as refugees within Iraq. These facts do not lie.
Haider Al-Ibadi is telling you that circumstance, conditions, they have put Al-Maliki and his government in a very difficult situation. Anybody in that position as a premier would have suffered the same effects.
Possibly so. And that is why continuously we've said that the current setup, the political setup, only gives way for a certain system that does not benefit the Iraqi people. That's what we've said from the very start.
And
the
is that something,
political setup...
Is that something Haider Al-Ibadi, the Prime Minister, is capable to be more inclusive? For 2 years, Salih Al-Mutlak and his people, the Accord, Al-Sadriyin, all these people, they say this is a very narrow-minded and a very narrow-based government, is not letting us in.
Well, it's not true. I think if you look at the popularity of the government, it has attracted the approval of most political parties. The majority have approved the government now. It has got, its popularity has risen drastically in the last few months. There are still killings in Iraq every day. There are still challenges every day. Probably you concentrate on these statements more than you concentrate on the real life of the people. But don't forget, we have been through almost a civil war because of the terrorism, because of the militias.
After the bombing of Samarra, pretty much the Prime Minister just relinquished his power and let the criminals and the militias, especially the Sadriyin, to reign havoc in Baghdad.
It's not Samarra. Samarra may be a trigger, but terrorism has started to plunge the country into civil war. And Ba'athists as well, they had a very active role in plunging the country into civil war after they lost power in Iraq. So we had a great challenge of these terrorist militias who are a reaction to the terrorists, which were trying to plunge the country into civil war. And now we are rectifying the things. It takes time.
Haider Al-Ibadi says more time is needed. The culprits are the militias and the Ba'athists, and he is looking for more time. He has pretty much 2 years left before a general election.
Well, it's 5 years since the invasion of Iraq, and we are going backward. I don't think people can wait. People are frustrated now. They look, they are living in a frustration, and they are losing hope in this political process. I definitely disagree with Mr. Haider Al-Ibadi that, you could see the improvement of the faces of the Iraqis. I could see it in a different way, and I could tell him that last week I held a conference, and just after I finished the conference, 7 of the people who attended the conference were either killed or seriously injured just beside the meeting, and almost around the green zone, and with the presence of 4 checkpoints beside, near to them. None of these checkpoints did anything to those who killed these people. So where is the improvement? If you cannot hold a conference for 100 people and out of 100 you will kill 7. So where is the improvement? How could people rely on this political process and go for the election after a few months? I think the mercy bullet will be shot at this political process and at the democracy if we cannot ensure decent and honest election after a few months from now.
Salih Al-Mutlak, thank you very much. We will take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion. And I'm going to ask Anas Tikriti, what does the international community meeting in Sweden this week expect from Al-Maliki? Stay with us.
Prime Minister Maliki is a good guy, a good man with a difficult job. I support him. It's not up to the politicians in Washington to say whether he remains in his position. George W. Bush, U.S. President.